O Tomorrows, a billion-year chronicle of the myriad species and mixed fortunes of man, is a science fiction tale that explores the dark possibility of what could happen when humanity spreads across the stars and encounters a species far more advanced than itself. A grim, yet thought-provoking piece of speculative evolution that challenges us to question the very limits of what can be considered man. It was self-published in 2006 by C.S. Koseman, also known by his pen name Nima Ramjet. Koseman's work is important to me because O Tomorrows, along with some of his other writings, was one of my first introduction to a type of fiction called speculative evolution, something I've been fascinated with ever since. However, before we continue, I must warn you, I'll be spoiling the entire story. That said, it doesn't matter much. The plot itself isn't the focal point of the book, nor is its conclusion. If you do wish to experience it firsthand, though, the book's available for free, and I will leave a PDF link in the description. If you're not fond of digital books or would like to support the creator, you can pre-order a physical copy and other items through the link I'll leave in the description. Also, I won't follow the events in the order they appear in the book. Instead, I've created a continuous timeline of the main events, which I will use to guide the story. If you'd like to check it out, I will leave a link to the Google Docs version. And one last note, if you're already familiar with the story or just want to hear my conclusion, you can skip ahead. I've marked the timestamps. With that said, let's explore the strange and fascinating future O Tomorrows envisions for humanity. The story begins with Earth's political unification. In the book's own words, this was the moment humanity began to be worth mentioning. With the world united, humanity turned its gaze toward expansion across other worlds, setting its sight on the most promising candidate, Mars. However, this endeavor was not an easy one. It required a step-by-step approach, beginning with the terraforming of the planet, a monumental project that took centuries to complete. Once the process was finished, though, the first settlers arrived, followed by Earth's industries. This movement not only initiated Earth's golden age, but also transformed Mars into, quite literally, a second world, both a new frontier and a less important place. As Martian settlers gradually became Martians, the planet was reshaped into their own world. Over generations, Mars' environmental pressures and genetic engineering altered the settlers, eventually leading to the emergence of an almost distinct species, separate from their Earth cousins. All this led to around the year 3006, when Mars began blocking transportation of non-essential goods to Earth, culminating in an interplanetary war. This devastating conflict saw the destruction of Phobos, one of Mars' moons, raining debris onto the planet. Meanwhile, Earth suffered a powerful strike at its pole that erased a third of its population. Only after these events, with nearly 80 billion souls lost, was a truce signed. Humanity realized it could not remain divided, so the truce mandated the sterilization of both Earthlings and Martians alike. They were replaced with a new species, the genetically engineered star people. These beings were designed to adapt to Earth, Mars, and other newly colonized worlds. Built with superior intelligence and capabilities, hopefully making them less prone to violence than their ancestors. The star people ushered in a new era of colonization. They settled Venus, the asteroid belt, and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. However, the solar system eventually became too small for them, so they expanded to other stars, eventually conquering the entire Orion arm. Humanity entered a golden age, where wealth and technology flourished. The book describes that each person was richer than some nations are today. By this time, humanity had encountered a plethora of alien colonies across countless worlds. None of these, however, showed any signs of intelligence, and humanity seemed to be alone, until a discovery changed this notion. On a distant planet, humanity discovered Pandora, a dinosaur-like tetrapod with a calcium-based skeleton. the only species with those characteristics in a world dominated by three-limbed creatures with copper-based skeletons. Its existence sparked intense debate and fear. Some saw it as evidence of divine intervention, leading to a resurgence of religion, while others believed it was irrefutable proof of advanced alien life. The discovery prompted humanity to prepare for a potential alien encounter, stocking weapons capable of forcibly novaing stars. Humanity's encounter with the Q was inevitable. The Q, a billion-year-old nomadic species with mastery over nanotechnology, voyaged through the galaxy's arms in epoch-spanning migrations. Their religion, meant to safeguard their species from their own godlike powers, justified their reshaping of the universe as sacred privilege. When they encountered humanity's colonized worlds, where native life forms are either highly reduced or entirely absent, and where genetically engineered recreations of Earth's life were sprinkled in, they saw these actions as blasphemy. The Q launched a devastating assault, eradicating humanity within a millennium. Survivors were transformed into countless forms to serve as pets, tools, and even toys. A few managed to escape this fate, however, hiding in disguised, sheltered ships, launching themselves into interstellar space, and remaining silent in hopes of avoiding detection. The book describes a myriad of post-humans created by the Q. Worms, titans, predators and prey, mantelopes, swimmers, lizard herders, tempters, bone crushers, colonials, flyers, hand flappers, blind folk, loopsiders, striders, parasites, fingerfishers, hedonists, insectophagi, and the ruin hunters. We also have the spacers, but they were not created by the Q. They are descendants of those who fled them and evolved to live on the hide, through interstellar space in the free-fall environment of their arc ships. However, to understand the rest of the story, only two of those post-human species are significant. The insectophagi, as their name implies, were specialized in eating insects, with their leathery faces protecting them from stings and their worm-like tongues adept to catch prey within nests, and the ruin hunters, that on the other hand were a more forgettable species. The Q neither invested much effort in diminishing their intelligence, nor erased the ruins left behind by the Star People civilization on their planet. On the contrary, they also left behind remnants of their own civilization after their departure. After 43 million years, the Q moved to the next arm of the galaxy, as they always did, leaving behind only kilometer-high monuments on most of the worlds they once dominated. Most post-human species perished soon after their departure. For the spacers, however, this marked an opportunity. No longer reliant on planets, they merged their arcs into a single, colossal structure, vast enough to rival entire worlds, becoming their new capital. The ruin hunters, by contrast, began rebuilding their civilization just a millennium after the Q's departure. Aided by their luck, their progress was dangerously fast, often fueled by the reckless replication of technologies they barely understood. This quick advancement led to multiple world wars, 5 in total, 2 of which were nuclear exchanges. Yet, these trials hardened them. They were baptized with fire. Over generations, the spacers evolved with the aid of genetic engineering, becoming the beings later known as asteromorphs. Their bodies grew compact and spindly, their fingers branching into versatile limbs, and their sphincters transforming into jet-like organs for locomotion. Free from gravity and equipped with the means to experiment on future generations, their brains expanded to unimaginable sizes, their thoughts so complex that you and I could not hope to even begin to comprehend them. Despite these changes, They remained human in one crucial aspect: their desire to expand. They built fleets of subarcs, spreading their influence across the heavens, and establishing an empire within just 1,000 years. Yet, they stayed on the periphery of star systems, quietly observing the struggles of their distant relatives. The ruin hunters, on the other hand, began to notice their sun expanding. Advanced as they were, they could do nothing to stop that process. So, they did the next best thing they could. They replaced their organic bodies with cybernetic forms. The first generation consisted of robotic beings housing organic brains. But soon, they went a step further, digitizing their minds into highly advanced quantum computers. They became the Gravitos, robotic beings capable of minute control of gravity to both move and interact with the world. In just a few million years, some post-humans regained sapience and built new civilizations. Among them were the bug-facers, descendants of the insectophagi, who gradually came to resemble the insects they preyed upon. Their leather faces ossified into their jaw structure. Their digits became pincer-like appendages, and their metabolisms partially reverted to ectothermy in their planet's mild climate. Their intelligence re-emerged through tool use, initially for breaking into insect nests. And from there, it was only a matter of time before they became a spacefaring civilization. However, as they rose, they were attacked by unknown alien species. Though records of the aggressors were lost to time, they were likely not the cue. After a brutal cycle of orbital and land wars, the bug-facers emerged victorious, but not unscathed. Their world was stained by alien life, and they inherited a deep, lasting xenophobia. As post-humans became spacefaring, they became an empire. Among the species were the snake people, who evolved from the worms, the killer folk, who evolved from the predators, the modular people, who evolved from the colonials, the pterosapiens, who evolved from the flyers, the symbiotes, who evolved from the parasites, the sail people, who evolved from the fingerfishers, the satyriacs, who evolved from the hedonists, the tool breeders, who evolved from the swimmers, and earned their name because they lived in the sea and could not forge metal. To begin a civilization, they had to become masters of biotechnology early in their history by, as their name implied, breeding other life forms to become their tools. The Saurosapiens, who evolved from the lizards that the lizard herders once farmed, and in time, the descendants of the lizard herders themselves were domesticated and used by the Saurosapiens for food and labor. The asymmetric people, who came from the Loopsiders, given their planet's overwhelming gravitational force, they had no hope of leaving it, so they engineered a superior species that could live on more common worlds. However, despite their origins, they ultimately eradicated all Loopsiders. The first civilization to arise formed the post-human empire within the first few million years, followed by waves after 10 and 20 million years. The bug-facers, however, took 40 million years to join and remained largely isolated due to their deep-rooted xenophobia. The asteromorphs and graftos never joined. The godlike asteromorphs had no interest in lesser beings, while the graftos saw themselves as the sole inheritors of the star people. Over time, they became so detached from their organic origins that they no longer recognized biological life as truly alive. The graftos remained quiet, only refining their interstellar travel, but once it was done, they set out to cleanse the stars of other post-humans. The bug-facers were the first to recognize the threat and fight back, but despite their resistance, they ultimately lost. Yet, for reasons unknown, their defiance spared them from the horrors that followed. With ruthless efficiency, the graftos darkened suns, bombarded worlds, and erased the entire civilizations. In just 10,000 years, the empire of 80 million years was no more, and much like the Q before them, the Gravitos reshaped the Bugfacers into a myriad of forms. The machine empire that followed was smooth, but not completely uniform. After various doctrinal and philosophical revolutions, a faction of machines began to recognize all life. At first, this movement was quiet, its followers practiced it in secrecy, engineering entire lineages of organics that could live, move, and think as freely as they could. In some cases, the creators even fell in love with their creations. Over time, the ideology gained momentum and was practiced openly, but it soon met opposition, leading to civil war. Though the conflict left no lasting scars on the Machine Empire, it exposed a deeper truth. The empire was too vast, too rigid, too stagnant, and eventually it would lead to its downfall. Time, however, didn't have to act, as the empire's end was far sooner and more dramatic. For a long time, the Machine and Astermarth's empire coexisted, each remaining in its own domain. Both understood that a war between them, wielding the power to annihilate planets en masse, could lead not only to mutual destruction, but also to the devastation of entire regions of the galaxy. However, after its internal turmoil, the Machine Empire found itself in need of a common enemy to unify its fractured rule. The carnage that followed the war between these godlike civilizations is beyond our comprehension. So much life was lost that the initial Gravital Purge paled in comparison. The conflict raged for millions of years, and in the end, the Astermarths emerged victorious. They had evolved even further, reaching a higher state of godliness. Their brains extended like wings from the side of their heads, and their finger-like limbs transformed into intricate, sail-like structures. As improbable as it seemed, some organic subjects of the Machine Empire survived the chaos. The Astermarths took their genetic codes and began rebuilding the galaxy, repopulating entire planets. The machines, though spared from total annihilation due to their usefulness, were not left unchanged. Stripped of their gravity manipulation and immortality, they were forcibly altered to possess shape-shifting bodies, ensuring maximum utility. Yet, because of their ancestors' actions, they were relegated to second-class citizenship in the new-born empire. As the Astermarths repopulated the galaxy, they ensured no usurpers like the Gravitos would ever rise again. To oversee and guide these new worlds, they created gravity-adapted versions of themselves, less capable due to gravity's constraints, but still demigods in their own rights. These beings are called terrestrial spacers. With spindly, spider-like limbs and reduced brains, they ruled over their domains, though they grew corrupt over time, demanding worship from their subjects. This ultimately proved useful in maintaining order. The reconstruction of the shattered galaxy took 2 million years, but once order was restored, the wealth available to its subjects was beyond description. Comparing it to modern standards would be like explaining 20th century geopolitics and living conditions to a hunter-gatherer from the dawn of humanity. Eventually, the Empire encountered a neighboring galaxy ruled by diverse unions of beings, led by the ambicephali, serpentine creatures with heads on both ends and a retractable body used for interaction. Like humanity, they had undergone cycles of regression, evolutionary radiations, and self-imposed genetic redesigns. Despite their differences, the two empires united, forming a single entity known as the United Galaxies. The United Galaxies would, at long last, re-encounter and subdue the Q. They would unlock the technology to create wormholes, weaving them across the galaxies and rendering traditional space travel obsolete. They would even achieve biological immortality someday. For a time, all men were gods. But maybe the achievement that matters most for us is that, one day, Earth was rediscovered. The book describes not only the discovery of the planet itself, but also what followed. In this way, quote, "The birthplace of humanity, where the omnipresent asteromorph, the star-gliding machine, and the millions of humble resident races could all trace their origins. It was made quietly, by a singular researcher copying the vestiges of forgotten history, decade after decade. Millions of years of wars, invasions and extinctions had buried the evidence thoroughly and comprehensively. When she finally came across irrefutable evidence, nobody was around to celebrate. That would come later." The discovery sparked a certain amount of interest, though nowhere as much as other breakthroughs had. To most humans of the cosmos, their ancestral birthplace was a simple and interesting piece of information. A piece of trivia with which they had lost all ties. Still, a ship was sent forth, and it landed without ceremony. For now, there was no intelligence left on Earth. Too far away from the main centers of population, it had been completely ignored, gone stagnant and feral. But still, it was home. When the explorers stepped out, human feet trod on old Earth once more, after an absence of 560 million years. Mankind was back home. End quote. The book concludes with the revelation that humanity has been extinct for 1 billion years. The story is told from the perspective of an unknown alien race that has discovered remnants of humanity's past societies. It ends with the message that humanity never had the fate of a grand finale or a greater purpose. Instead, its essence was found in the everyday lives of individuals, a continuous thread of lives, dreams, fears and goals from beginning to end. Love today, and seize all tomorrows. Like any good sci-fi story, All Tomorrows dive into various ethical and philosophical themes. A species choosing to alter itself, whether to achieve unity, as the humans did, or in the hopes of reaching greater heights, like the Loopsiders. The use of physical transformation as a form of punishment, along with the motivations behind such punishment, be it religious zealotry, as with the Q, or a sheer romanticism toward the past, like the Gravitos, the persistence of life and civilization, the nature of humanity, the meaning of inheritance, whether of a name, an idea, or a legacy. It also raises difficult questions. Is it just to punish children for the crimes of their parents? Would it be justifiable for the United Galaxies to punish the Q for their crimes against humanity, given that those crimes were committed millions of years ago, and that neither the perpetrators nor the victims remain? Can an entire population be held accountable for the crimes of its leaders? The Gravitos were stripped of their farms, but as the story reveals earlier, the Empire was divided, and it's likely that not every single Gravito took part in the war against the Asteromorphs. But perhaps the most profound question it poses is the one that underlies them all, the purpose of an entity, be it a single individual, a nation, or an entire civilization. The book clearly concludes that purpose lies not in the destination but in the journey itself. It's not just about achieving milestones or reaching goals because, in a way, the future is merely a compelling illusion. Think about it. Consider all your goals and dreams. Now, imagine the moment you achieve them. It sounds great, I know. But what happens next? Life doesn't stop. Nor does your needs for aspirations. Once you attain something, you inevitably set your sights on the next goal, and the cycle continues. What once lay in your future becomes your past, not as obstacles to conquer, but as experiences that shape who you are. And being shaped is key here. They shape you, but they do not define you. You might say, okay, But my dream is to die as a hero, or be remembered in history. I'm not here to judge, mainly because some of my own delusions aren't so different. But even if you achieve such inherently final accomplishments, as a living person, you are so much more than those titles could ever hope to do you justice. So, in the book's view, and partly in my own, what truly matters isn't the destination but the journey itself. The experiences, the lessons, and the way you live each waking moment. It's about how you spend your time and what you care about, rather than fixating on a final goal that doesn't truly exist. While I agree that the journey is more important than the destination to some extent, I still believe that the end goals matter, at least on an individual level. A person can have a goal that guides them, giving their life direction, hope, and meaning, which are often necessary along the way. Think of it this way: a path wouldn't exist without a destination to move toward. However, when we apply this idea to a collective, problems start to arise. Groups, nations, or even entire societies cannot have end goals in the same way individuals do. Instead, they have aspirations and desired short or long-term outcomes, shaped by the ambitions of the people within them. When a group starts to adopt absolute end goals, it begins to override and impose its will on the goals of individuals, both on those who follow it and those who are seen as wrong and thus forced to comply with the rules of the collective. In the story, we clearly see this dynamic in the main antagonists, like the Q and the Gravitos. But this pattern also emerges in Martians and the asymmetrical people, who struck their father species' home planet out of jealousy over their development. Even the Asteromorsphs, in their goal to prevent a species like the Gravitos from ever rising again, controlled the worlds and populations of the galaxy as if they owned them. In the end, I believe end goals should remain personal, belonging to individuals, not as the sole purpose of a life, but as a lighthouse that provides direction and guidance. Collectives, on the other hand, should avoid rigid end goals and instead pursue aspirations, adapting along the way and never, ever mistaking them for the sole purpose of their existence.